Okay, we're going from, we just left Rome and we're heading up to Venice in Italy. And we're on the bus right now. The Trafalgar tour bus. As you can see, it's a bus. That's what we're on. There's Olivia.
Yourself.
And of course, myself. Hopefully I show up okay.
It's a beautiful day.
A little cloudy. The last couple of days we had sunshine. Maybe partly sunny, partly cloudy, but right out there. It wasn't really too hot. I was actually fearing that it was going to be super hot, like Phoenix summer times.
Well, they mentioned it's until July, so it's not going to be so much difference for us.
So it's really, end of April, early May, so we picked the right time, I think. Come.
Yeah. Either way, they say it's like, it's very humid. I would say it's like Culiacan, humid and hot.
Right.
In summertime, so it's not going to be too different from me.
Right. It's just a lot of people warned us that it's going to be like super hot, almost like the summer times in Phoenix, but it wasn't quite that hot, at least this time of year. Maybe similar weather though that we were having in Phoenix, so all is fair.
How many minutes today?
Oh, there's about 4 minutes.
Una vacación.
Because it's not part of Tuscany, that's part of Emilia-Romagna. You'd have to ask for it because Tuscany want to give you their local food. So if it's a tourist restaurant, then they have a mixture of all different dishes and it's usually dedicated to the chef where he comes from. So then we're going to learn about this when we go to Venice. We're going to learn about Venetian food, we're going to learn about Tuscan food, and so I think you all like food, yeah? You like to eat, and you like to try wines. They've got some special hidden treasures in Tuscany, some wine tasting of course, olive oil tasting, and things, little surprises for you. So I want you to get that feel when you go home. Why is it so different and beautiful? So we've got the scenes, we've got on the road as well, and find some nice cars. Yeah? Most of the cars, Fiat group of car, Fabbrica Italiano Automobilistica Torino. And Fiat is based in Turin, Torino, which is in the region of Piedmont. And Turin is, if you look on your map where Milan is, left side on top, you can see Milano. And you see left of there is Turin, near the mountains. And Turin is also where the King of Italy was from, Victor Emmanuel, who was made king in 1861. And he was a royal family of Savoy, because Piedmont was a separate country, and Turin was the capital of that country. Yeah. And a very important city for the Fiat car production, which also Fiat owned Alfa Romeo and Lancia, and also made shareholdings in Ferrari. Group. And also we've got Lamborghini cars and Maserati, you see often when driving on Sundays. A lot of Italians now worry to drive nice cars, because now they are very strict with tax laws. And in Italy we have different police forces. We have the Carabinieri, which is the dark blue uniform and the red stripe down the leg, and these are the head police. They are linked with the army. Yeah, so they are protecting government and state. They're the most important police. They're controlling everything, really. And ended up near St. Peter's on the river. Then they were brought up by the shepherd, and as they grew older, they became very competitive with each other. And eventually Romulus, the Palatine Hill by Circus Maximus, by the Colosseum, he founded this hill and saying, that's my hill and these are my men. Remus, the twin brother, jumped over the line he made onto the hill, so Romulus killed Remus. And it was Rome, or Romulus, that named Rome, after his name, Rome Romulus. And it was then Romulus that joined all the 7 hills together, the different tribes, to form a group of people called the Latins. So the second grid that we have, we've got the Etruscans, the first grid. The second grid is the Latins, which were based, they were getting strong. Now the Latins weren't as organized, as academic as the North, as the Etruscans. The Latins were they were like the Scots, they were very aggressive people, great fighters, but maybe not as organized as the Etruscans. Then, from there, you go further south, our third grid, which is Naples, Napoli. Who was there? Well, there's no Romans. Of course, we had Greeks. And the Greeks were going across from Greece, of course, and trading with Mediterranean posts and finding outposts in Sicily, and they founded Paestum and Naples, Neapolis. And they weren't too bothered about wars, the Greeks. They were more important about money and trade and trading posts. The Greeks were great mathematicians, great business people, and great architecture, which you see in many of the Greek cities, not only in Athens, the Acropolis, but also even where they took over parts of areas of Sicily and also the south of Italy. So what happened then? Where did these Romans come from? So eventually, which we'll see today, very interesting, again this is part of our beautiful journey up, en route, on our way to Florence and the north, we're going to see a lot of hilltop towns. So the Etruscans, from Florence, made their way, as they grew bigger and grew stronger and their armies grew, they realized there's something more out there. Yeah, there's more to conquer. We need to have more area. So they started building hilltop towns all the way down to Rome. And eventually they conquered the Latins. And the last king was Tarquin, was the last Latin king, and the Etruscans took over. They mixed together for 200 years. And then the Etruscans, together with marriage and children, they moved further south and conquered the Greeks. So these three, then mixing together over another 200 years, formed a great group of people. Imagine their beautiful combination, the cocktail. The Etruscans, organization, building, weaponry, the Latins, great fighters, and the Greeks, mathematicians, business people, architecture. And this is what made up the Roman, these three different groups of people. Now eventually the early Romans, which came about, the first Romans that came about, they were great, wonderful. They started their Senate, and they started to get stronger, and the Senate were ruling, and eventually, of course, there were 2 different types of Romans. There was the plebeians, who had no rights whatsoever. They were slaves, and we had the patricians, which were the wealthy Romans, who had money and would always have slaves. Now, as the Romans grew stronger, the Senate grew stronger, they realized in Sicily and Sardinia, there was a threat to them. There was a group of people called the Carthaginians. And the Carthaginians, Carthage, is in North Africa. Okay? And Carthage, had a seafaring nation of 400,000 people, in Sicily and Sardinia. So there were 3 famous wars. You'll know these wars, you'll have heard them at school. The Punic Wars. And the first Punic War is when Rome went to Sicily to get rid of the Carthaginians, and they left. The Second Punic War is the most famous. Remember Hannibal? You heard of Hannibal? Not Hannibal Lecter, but Hannibal with his elephants. His 37 elephants, his 90,000 infantry, his 12,000 cavalry, crossed over the hills from Spain, from North Africa, from North Africa, Tunis, across to Spain, into France, over the Alps, and surprised the Romans. And he actually was winning against the Romans. He surprised them, but he made the mistake of passing Rome to rest, but also the Romans went to Carthage, and he had to chase them, and he lost the battle. The Third Punic War is when the son of Hannibal tried and failed miserably. This is when the Romans went to North Africa. They knocked down the city brick by brick. They even put salt on the ground so nothing would grow. And from there, of course, Rome knew there was more out there, more to conquer, more areas like Germany, and they grew stronger and stronger and stronger. When we talk about the history of Rome and the Roman emperors, there's so many, and many were crazy. You see many films, Vespasian, Caligula, some were great, Marcus Aurelius. Julius Caesar is known as the father of Italy, even today. The father, everybody wanted to be Caesar, Hitler, the Kaiser, Tsar of Russia. They used the names. They wanted to be, this was the great man. The Senate, this was the leader, a man with guts. He went out. And Caesar, Julius Caesar, was from a very royal family called the Julii family. On our last day, I could organize a dinner where they found the excavations of the villa where he lived. And this Julii family weren't the wealthiest family. The father of Julius Caesar was called Julius, and he was a Senate member, not wealthy, but well-known, and a very titled family. Julius Caesar was brought up with servants, and eventually he was brought up with Brutus. He had his own guards, he was taught rhetoric, politics, but eventually the father was, of course, opposing the new Senate leader, and the father was killed. And then, of course, Julius Caesar spent the rest of his childhood being brought up by his uncle Marius, and Marius, of course, then also was killed. He was a very good leader, great general. He had his own army, but lost the battle. So Julius had a great training as a young man. By 17, he was married to Cornelia. He had to escape, in fact, because Sinus, who was the new Roman leader, Senate, said, okay, divorce your wife, and Julius Caesar, I know who you are, I know you've got a great family name, you're young, I won't kill you, but do as I say. But Julius Caesar refused, he escaped and joined the Navy. He had a parchment of paper which his uncle Marius gave him before he died to give him passage on a ship as training as on the Navy. He spent years at sea, eventually became a captain, eventually he was captured. Ransom had to be paid. The ransom which was paid by his remaining family, he went back afterwards, which he told the pirates, I'm going to come back and kill you and get your money. And he did so. Once he got back to Rome, he was forgiven by the Senate, and he went back with the ships, he conquered the pirates, took back the money and killed them all. He promised that while he was there. So really an ambitious man. This man is ambitious. So when he got back to Rome, Julius Caesar, people feared him really because they saw this young man who didn't fear anything. He had a certain way of doing things. So they higher up these Roman senates who were getting older wanted to get rid of him a little bit. They were a bit fearful. He was a young guy, but sharp, he was brave. So he was sent to Spain, where he was taking over Spain. He made loads of money. He was out the way from the Senate. But one thing he was great at, Julius Caesar, was marketing. And he marketed from so far away. He had his own speakers in the forum who would mention his name, what he was doing, and what he wanted. And he worked for the working class people. He kept on saying, this is what I'll do for you. So he wanted to vote. But nobody wanted him there. And there was a new Senate. There was an opportunity for a new Senate and voting. And he wasn't meant to be there, but he came back with a load of money from Spain. Partly he gave to the Senate, and the rest he kept himself for marketing, and he got a seat in the Senate. And this is where everything changed for Rome itself. Eventually, we find that the Senate, we have a great ruler, a general, who didn't like Julius Caesar at all, but worried about him, was called Pompey. And then also Mauritius. And these three, let's say, Julius Caesar, Mauritius, and Pompey, were looking at taking over the rest of the Senate. They wanted to swing the votes. So they got together and they said to Pompey, what do you want out of this deal? We'll control the Senate, we'll make decisions. And Pompey said, well, I want to stay in Rome, I want to be a general, and I want to have a statue of myself. And also I want to marry, by this time Julius Caesar was married, and I want to marry your daughter, Julius Caesar, as well. But she was only 14. So Julius Caesar, when she's 16, you can marry her. So everything was agreed. Then Marius, he was the richest man, he was a merchant. He said, what do you want? And he said, well, I want more trade. I want all the new borders and whatever is conquered, I want all the trade coming in. It'll all be mine. Okay. And then they asked Julius Caesar, what do you want? And Julius Caesar said, well, I want to borrow the money from you, and I want my own army, and I want to go to France, Gaul at the time, and to conquer Gaul. So those days, you see, if you had your own army, it wasn't sponsored by the Senate, you had to pay for yourself. But you got a lot of booty, a lot of money, a percentage. If you didn't pay the money back you borrowed, you were killed, your head was cut off. So he borrowed the money, he had 30,000 soldiers, imagine a lot of guts to finance 30,000 soldiers, and he went to France, to Gaul. There, he met Mark Antony at the borders of Provence, near Monaco. Then he conquered France. He was the first to get to England, to the Thames. While he was there, of course, and this is many, many years, transportation, he was there, eventually he was in England, by the Thames in London, and then France was being conquered by Victorinox, another French ruler. He came back and got hold of Victorinox, reconquered again, and by this time, all these years went by, what had happened is, Pompey had married his daughter, and Mauritius was there as well, but Mauritius got killed in a battle in Greece. Pompey, the daughter of Pompey, was giving birth and she died. So the marriage was finished. So there was only Pompey and Julius Caesar left. So what happened was Pompey sent a message to Julius Caesar and said, listen, I'll meet you in Rome, come by yourself. But Julius Caesar realized he'd be assassinated. So Julius Caesar, even today we use this word, he crossed the Rubicon to make a stand and marched into Rome and conquered Pompey. And from that moment, he became the Senate, became the ruler. And he became the father and the most popular. But on the way in, he was warned, beware the Ides of March, the 15th of March, 44 BC. And of course, on that date, he was going to the Senate, and that's where he was stabbed to death. And of course, by his best friend, Brutus. And Brutus was the last stab, and probably the one that killed him. And from there, from Julius Caesar, his nephew, took over, Caesar, Augustus, or Octavian. When you hear the word Octavian, Octavian was the nephew of Julius Caesar. Now Octavian had a sister called Octavia. Octavia married Mark Antony. Mark Antony was in love with Cleopatra. Don't forget, Julius Caesar had a son with Cleopatra. But also, Mark Antony loved Cleopatra. She was a very clever lady. So he wanted to leave Octavia and live in Egypt. And Mark Antony got really jealous of Octavian, this nephew, because don't forget, Mark Antony was a soldier, and he believed it was his right to have everything. He wasn't directly related, of course, so Octavian got everything that Julius Caesar had. So off went Mark Antony, divorced his wife, or the sister of Octavian, but then he stopped all the wheat production going into Italy, which was starving Rome. So Octavian then went to Egypt, and then that's where the suicide took place of course, Cleopatra, and of course, as well as Mark Antony. There, from that moment, of course, he came back and changed his name to Caesar Augustus. Caesar after his great uncle, and Augustus because of his religious beliefs. And he became the first emperor of Rome. Okay? And as we run through, this emperor of Rome, Octavius, or Caesar Augustus, the same man, he was one of the best emperors in history, really, and so much for Rome. After which, many crazy emperors. Remember the Arch of Constantine by the Colosseum? That's when everything changed again. Constantine converted to Christianity, the church got power, and everything changed. By then, by the 4th, 5th century, it was the end of the Roman Empire. The church was very clever, as the church got stronger and stronger. Anybody conquering from Germany, from outside, from France, coming in, the church just agreed with them. So the next real powerful conqueror was Charlemagne. And Charlemagne came from Germany, and the Pope said, hello, what do you want? We can help you. We'll crown you emperor. So of course Charlemagne said, oh, it's very nice of you. And but the Pope said, well, by the way, while you're conquering the rest of Europe, Spain and all those places, Belgium and Netherlands, could we have a church? Yeah? So they were building churches all over Europe from the 8th century. And then Charlemagne's son took over, who was useless. And their grandchildren were even worse, Ludwig, Lothar and Charles. And they split the empire up again. Then we have the Vikings, and then the Normans. And always the Pope saying, welcome, we'll make you emperor. Yeah? And so they were getting control, because everybody was attacking in that period. And eventually, don't forget, Italy, by the time of the 10th century, was split into different regions and different kingdoms. And these different families ruled the different kingdoms, who usually became popes or related to the popes, like the Borgias, yeah? The Borgia, like the Medicis, yeah? Very clever, the Medicis, of financing a pope where they got huge amounts of power. The Venetian Republic, so there were very powerful families controlling the regions or the countries we have of Italy. And this lasted all the way until 1861. And so as we go through the regions, I'll talk about the regional history and the history between the 10th century and also the 16th, 17th centuries. As long as we've got a concept of what happened and how it was founded, where we have Etruscans, Latins, and Greeks, and then eventually Romans, and eventually the church coming into power, and eventually then the different kingdoms of Italy, which were then established to control, and they were all mostly controlled by the popes. And money was coming in from everywhere. And Italy became very powerful, very wealthy, and had the greatest people you could imagine. Michelangelo, you know, Leonardo da Vinci, the greatest artists, you know, and writers of their day. And the Medicis of Florence, had the money. They had the first bill of exchange. They were the richest. So all this background, we'll find out about Florence and different cities. And as long as you've got that concept, and we'll talk later as well, after the unification of Italy, Victor Emmanuel, Garibaldi and Mazzini in 1861, we'll talk about the First World War, we'll talk about the Second World War, okay? And of course Mussolini as well. And then we'll find out what happened and how Italy runs today because of what happened in its history. Thank you for listening.